I remember it like it was yesterday. It was a little after 9 o'clock in the evening. My dad and I are sitting in the living room watching television, and boom! Welcome to the Sonic Boomers. I'm Pete Torriello.
And I'm Maureen Torriello.
Back again with another fun-filled edition, and nothing says fun like a New Jersey disaster.
And we have a bunch of them to talk about
today. And of course, I'm being facetious, but we are indeed talking about well-known New Jersey disasters. And boy, we seem to be a state with a lot of them. Let's begin with one of the, if not the most famous New Jersey disaster, and that's the explosion of the Hindenburg, which took place at the Lakehurst Naval Air Station on May 6, 1937, killing 36 people.
Now, what was the Hindenburg? It was the largest rigid airship ever built. It measured 804 feet long, 135 feet in diameter, gas capacity of 7 million cubic feet.
The only place with more gas is the United States Congress.
Then and now. It was designed for a transatlantic passenger service, and it was filled with highly flammable hydrogen. And that was due to U.S. restrictions on helium exports to Nazi Germany at the time. The airship carried 35 passengers and 61 crew on its final flight from Frankfurt, Germany to Lakehurst, New Jersey.
So here comes the Hindenburg. It's trying to get to the mooring mast in Lakehurst during a thunderstorm. And they spent a little bit of time circling around, hoping for an improvement in the weather. As they were bringing the Hindenburg toward the mooring mast, they dropped the ropes down from the gondola for the ground crew to take hold of the ropes and hold the ship down and guide it toward the mast. And a few seconds later, the back end of the Hindenburg explodes in a huge fireball. People are jumping to the ground from the gondola to save their lives, and in about 40 seconds, the entire thing is consumed, leaving nothing left but a smoldering skeleton sitting on the pad in Lakehurst.
It's unbelievable how fast that thing went up.
Reporter Herb Morrison from radio station WLS in Chicago was on the scene, recording a transcribed broadcast of the landing of the Hindenburg that was going to be played maybe later the next day or later in the week. So he just happened to be rolling when the thing exploded. His eyewitness account of what happened is legendary. There is some incredible footage of it that was shot on newsreels that you can find anywhere on YouTube. And also Herb Morrison's narration is also available. And I have to tell you, it is exciting.
There were 97 people on board, 35 died. There was 13 passengers, 22 crew, and 1 ground crew member was killed. There was 36 fatalities. What I find remarkable, though, is that 62 people survived.
And nobody knows exactly what happened. There are conspiracy theories about the Hindenburg that abound to this day. There are those who feel that it was struck by lightning, others who feel that it was static electricity. There may have been a gas leak in the ship. There were even rumors that it was an act of sabotage. None of that ever proven. It remains pretty much a mystery to this day. Now, if you grew up in the Asbury Park area, you may know what our next New Jersey disaster is going to be, and that is the wreck of the Moro Castle.
Now, the Moro Castle was a luxury cruise liner from the 1930s, which seems to be a bad era for New Jersey. And it made runs between New York City and Havana, Cuba regularly. And so in the early morning hours of Saturday, September 8th, 1934, en route from Havana to New York, the ship caught fire, and a total of 137 passengers and crew members were killed by the fire.
First responders from all over southern Monmouth County responded, helping rescue survivors from the rough sea, also bringing a lot of the dead back on shore. And the still burning ship eventually beached itself right behind the famous Asbury Park Convention Hall. And for a few months, it was a tourist attraction until they finally were able to tow it away and sell it for scrap. But if you've ever seen the photographs or the newsreel footage, You just imagine this ocean liner, this cruise ship, sitting on a sandbar behind Convention Hall, and it's just burned out, smoldering wreckage. It is an eerie, eerie sight to see.
As with a lot of these disasters, something positive did kind of come out of it. Today, the use of fire retardant materials, automatic fire doors, ship-wide fire alarms are all the results of the Moro Castle disaster.
Why is it? It always has to be after a disaster, we get changes in safety codes and safety systems.
The Titanic.
Yeah.
People, I think at that time it was a bit of arrogance and hubris.
There was a tremendous hubris. They believed it to be unsinkable.
And of course nothing is. But they were convinced that it was fine, and it wasn't.
Well, there ain't a New Jerseyan around that I can think of who doesn't have a Hurricane Sandy story.
Mm-hmm. Now, Hurricane Sandy, to our memory anyway, is one of the few really dead-on hit storms that came to New Jersey.
Right.
I mean, we've often had hurricane damage and storms off the coast, but this was a direct hit, and I don't recall ever having that before.
Correctly predicted by the European model. If you go back a few episodes of the Sonic Boomers, look for our show entitled Weather Gone Wild. We have weather observer Mike Barker on the show with us, and he does a fantastic explanation as to how Hurricane Sandy developed and why it hit where it did in New Jersey. Remember that the European model was the only weather forecasting model that correctly said that it was going to make a left-hand hook and plow through Brigantine and points north, which is exactly what happened.
But nonetheless, preparations began several days before it was due to arrive. We go back at October 26th. Cape May County was advising its residents on the barrier islands to evacuate. And there were voluntary evacuations for people in Manahawkin, Bayhead, Barnegat Light, Beach Haven, Harvey Cedars, Long Beach, Ship Bottom, and Stafford and Ocean County.
All aboard!
Governor of New Jersey at the time was Chris Christie, and he was ordering all
Beach Chair Christie.
He was ordering all the residents of the barrier islands from Sandy Hook to Cape May to evacuate. He even closed Atlantic City casinos. Tolls were suspended on the northbound Garden State Parkway.
Well, you know all hell is breaking loose when they stop the tolls on the Parkway.
And the westbound Atlantic City
but
Expressway.
Only northbound. Only northbound.
Well, you couldn't go southbound. President Obama even signed emergency declaration for New Jersey to allow the state to request federal funding and other assistance for actions taken before Sandy's landfall. October 28th, we got Mayor of Hoboken, Dawn Zimmer, also ordering the residents of basement and street-level residential units to evacuate due to possible flooding. On October 29th, now remember, it still hasn't come yet. October 29th, residents of Logan Township were ordered to evacuate. Jersey Central Power and Light told employees to prepare to work extended shifts. Most of the schools, colleges, and universities were closed on October 29th. Well, at least 509 of the 580 school districts were closed on October 30th. And although tropical storm conditions were inevitable and hurricane force winds were likely, the National Hurricane Center still did not issue any tropical cyclone watches or warnings for New Jersey.
We move on to the Exxon Refinery explosion in Bayway, just outside of Linden. In 1980, a plant worker named Charlie Moorcraft was working on the site at the time. Charlie Moorcraft suffered burns over 50% of his body. He was asked to change what are called manifold blanks on an octane-enhancing pipeline. While he was opening the pipeline, he noticed a leak, but disregarded the safety rules. Again, disregarded the safety rules. He was not wearing safety glasses. He was running past his still running truck to try and get to a safety shower. When he got to the shower, fumes ignited, there was an explosion, and before you know it, a good part of the refinery is up in flames.
And he had to extinguish his clothing and flesh with a puddle of water. But this explosion, like we said, left him severely burned. He spent 5 years in the hospital, and he had long-term physical and emotional trauma, as you can imagine.
His became a cautionary tale of workplace safety, and later, Moorcraft became a motivational speaker, touring the United States to warn against taking shortcuts and stressing that safety is everyone's responsibility. His story is often cited in safety training programs to emphasize strict adherence to procedure.
So once again, at least something good came out of it. Now, the 1987 fire that it destroyed the Long Branch Haunted Mansion. Dun, dun, dun.
It was a creepy place.
It was. It was a catastrophic fire on the Long Branch Pier, which was all wood. It extended out over the ocean, and it contained the haunted mansion was the biggest item on it, although there were also shops and small amusements.
Right. It was like 10,000 square feet, 4 stories, 30 rooms. I didn't know that there were 30 rooms, and I've been there.
That's a lot.
30 rooms, secret hallways, secret stairways, and live actors portraying murderers, monsters, and mythological features. And clearly, the live actors were the scariest thing to the Haunted Mansion. Famous Torriello family story.
I didn't know if I wanted to embarrass you or not, but I think you want to tell this story.
Which we tell to this day. We went down to the Haunted Mansion. We went down to Long Branch for a day with our kids. And Maureen wouldn't go in because she doesn't like haunted houses.
Well, like I said, it's not the haunted house per se, it's the dark. And not being able to find my way, and I get very claustrophobic, and it's not a good thing.
So I say, well, I'll go in, and I'll bring our young son, Sean, with me. He'll enjoy this. Let's go in. How bad can it be? And we're walking along. I remember they had this dining room table scene of all of these dead bodies sitting at the dining room table having dinner. And it would play this spooky organ music, and the keys would move.
Right.
It was scary stuff. It really was. And little Sean and I are walking down the dark corridor, and I see this figure of the Grim Reaper. I thought it was wax. I really thought it was, a dummy. And I reached up to touch it, and I'm like, wow, Sean, look at how real this looks. And the actor looks down at me. He's like, yeah. I let go of Sean's hand, and I'm running down the hall like my butt is on fire. And I leave the kid
good father
there with the Grim Reaper. And Sean is going, Dad, it's a guy in a costume. What are you running for?
One of my favorite stories.
I could not get my butt out of there fast enough.
Well, it was advertised as the world's largest haunted attraction.
Even the commercials were creepy.
They were. And I didn't realize it, but they drew crowds of up to 100,000 visitors a week at this haunted mansion. The fire caused at least $3 million in damage.
Right, because it wasn't just the haunted mansion that burned. It was a lot of structures adjacent to it.
Right. It was the whole pier, the businesses, which had like restaurants, and it had stores, and it had
Wheel of Fortune games
and things like that. So it just took the whole thing out. And unfortunately, it was almost too expensive to try and fix.
And when you're thinking about haunted house fires in New Jersey, dovetailing right on the haunted mansion has got to be the terrible 1984 fire at the haunted castle at Six Flags Great Adventure.
That was terrible. Because the haunted mansion, nobody died. But in 1984, There were 8 teenagers and 7 others who were just injured. 8 teenagers died. The victims were aged 15 to 19. They were all, sadly, this is so ironic, they were within 25 feet of a fire exit. And with the smoke, they got asphyxiated and they died from smoke inhalation.
Yeah, that'll kill you quick. The haunted castle opened in 1978 as a temporary haunted house. It was built from 17 aluminum semi-trailers connected to form a medieval-style castle facade. Visitors entered from a drawbridge across a moat, and they walked 450 feet down the path through dim corridors, encountering once again costumed actors, props, theatrical effects. It was considered a temporary structure. Therefore, it was not subject to the same building codes as a permanent facility, and therein lies the fatal mistake.
The fire began at 6:35 when a visitor used a lighter to see in a darkened passageway. The lighter ignited foam padding on the wall, which then spread to wood partitions. There was plywood, fabric, paper decorations, all highly flammable materials, and this blaze engulfed the structure within minutes.
And a number of safety issues were cited upon investigation. No sprinklers, no smoke or fire alarms, no fire retardant materials in the structure, not enough exits, and despite repeated safety warnings, the measures were not installed. The Jackson Township Fire Inspector did testify that he had never inspected the castle, and the township continued to classify it as a temporary attraction.
Now, in the legal aftermath, Six Flags Great Adventure and its parent company were indicted for aggravated manslaughter for recklessly causing the deaths. And the prosecution argued that ignoring safety recommendations was negligent. The defense claimed that the fire was arson and that no precautions would have saved lives. After an 8-week trial, the jury acquitted the company. However, the park later settled lawsuits with victims' families for $2.5 million each. I'm
not sure where the blame really lies. I suspect that there is enough blame to go around on many sides.
Next disaster is very close to here. It's in Woodbridge, New Jersey, 1951. This was the Pennsylvania Railroad commuter train, was called the Broker. It killed 85 people, injured over 500 people.
Train number 733 derailed in Woodbridge while it was crossing a temporary wooden trestle which was constructed to accommodate the building of an overpass on the New Jersey Turnpike.
Now, the train was carrying about 1,000 passengers. It was traveling at about 50 to 52 miles an hour, which exceeded the 25-mile-per-hour speed limit due to the sharp curve on the temporary track. 8 of the 11 cars derailed, with the first 2 cars falling on their sides and the third and fourth colliding down a 26-foot embankment, causing most of the fatalities.
Any kid that ever had a Lionel train set can tell you, when you take the curve too fast, mayhem is about to ensue.
And you would think that the grown-ups would know better.
Well, you know, they tried to blame the engineer for the accident, but he wound up being acquitted because it was discovered that they didn't have warning lights, and the railroad had very poorly communicated to the engineers that there was a speed limit reduction here. They sent out a few notes, but apparently it was insufficient to notify everybody that needed to know. So kind of hard to fully hang the blame on the engineer who did not receive the notification.
Piling on to that was the fact that there was another railroad that was having a labor strike at the time. So the people that ordinarily would have been on that train were coming on the Pennsylvania Railroad. So it led to them having over the capacity on the train.
Pennsylvania Railroad wound up settling for $15 million, making it the largest legal settlement in their history. It is said that if you walk along that section of track today, and that embankment is still there, if you look very carefully, you can still find evidence of some of the damage that took place. And I believe that they might even have a sign there now marking the spot where it happened.
I think I did see that they made sort of like a memorial with like a stone and a plaque or something like that at the spot. One of the nice things was that at that time, there were so many deaths and so many casualties that medical personnel and firefighters and police couldn't even deal with them all. So local residents actually opened their homes and took in some of the injured into their homes.
There's one event that took place, and I don't know if you would call it a disaster. I noticed that the newspaper accounts of it stayed away from the word disaster, probably because nobody got hurt. It was basically property damage, but it scared the hell out of everybody in the neighborhoods for miles around. I'm going back to June 24th of 1971. My father and I are sitting in the living room watching television. And I can tell you, I even remember the time that it occurred. It was just a little bit after 9 o'clock in the evening. And we're watching television, and all of a sudden, boom! And I remember it felt like the windows were going to blow out of our house, because the whole house shook, the windows rattled, and the night sky was illuminated like you were in the middle of the afternoon. And there were several explosions that took place. And it was hard to get a phone line. You would pick up the phone to make a call, and you wouldn't have a dial tone because everybody was on the telephone trying to figure out what was going on, calling their friends, calling their neighbors. I remembered finally getting a line and calling my buddies and saying, what was that? What do you know? What's going on? And of course, in typical Jersey style, people in the neighborhood were coming out of their houses, running out onto the front lawn, going out to the back lawn, looking up at the sky, because all you could see from my neighborhood was the flashes. And you could hear the boom, boom, boom every few minutes. But people were out with lawn chairs. People are out with lawn chairs. They're coming out with coolers.
I said, pop open a
Pop
beer.
open a cold one here. And a lot of people thought it was DuPont that exploded. It wasn't. It was the factory that was right across the street from DuPont, and that was Hercules. And Hercules made gunpowder and other explosives. And this was nitrocellulose that exploded. They had 2 million pounds of nitrocellulose in the warehouse. And that is what exploded. Fortunately, it took place in the evening. There weren't a lot of people on site at the plant, and nobody was killed, nobody was injured. But if you grew up in the Old Bridge Township, Sayreville area, you will remember the big explosion at the Hercules powder plant. So, what do you remember? What are the big events, the big disasters of your childhood or growing up here in New Jersey? We invite you to comment below. Before we go, we also want to invite you to like and subscribe because that helps us to get better numbers. And again, Maureen and I want to thank all of you for the huge increase that we have seen in our viewership. In fact, one of our recent shows is now ranked as one of the highest Sonic Boomers episode that we've ever published. So we want to thank you for that. And we will keep up the good work, and we hope that you will keep up the good work with liking and subscribing. And until the next edition of the Sonic Boomers, which remember, we launch every Thursday morning on YouTube at 9 a.m., I'm Pete Torriello.
And I'm Maureen Torriello.
Thanks for watching, and if you're listening to the podcast, thanks for listening.